The wind cut like blades that winter night. Mila walked quickly to the bus stop, her hands buried deep in her cheap coat pockets, trying to preserve what little warmth she had. Her scarf, thin old knit, the only thing that reminded her of her grandmother, was all that warmed her neck. She was returning from her night shift as an assistant at a bakery, exhausted and sleepy, but still sensitive to the world around her. That's how she saw him. A man standing on the corner without gloves, without proper coat, breathing as if the cold was crushing his lungs. He wore expensive clothes but trembled, not from weakness, but from something strange, restless, as if his body was freezing from within. Mila didn't think, didn't question, didn't analyze. She simply walked up to him, gently touched his arm and said, "Sirs, here." And she removed her own scarf, the only one she had, and placed it around the stranger's neck. The man slowly raised his gaze, so slowly it seemed dangerous, painful, like something contained for years. It was at that instant that his eyes changed, from confusion to shock, from shock to something deep, almost vulnerable. Welcome to Korean Mafia lovers. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. He didn't say thank you. He couldn't. Mila smiled simply, and was about to walk away when he held her wrist, not forcefully, not threateningly, just firmly. "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Because you looked cold," she replied. He stood motionless as if he had never heard something so simple, but Mila didn't know that the man before her was Yunho, one of the most feared Korean mafia leaders, someone no one touched, no one helped, no one looked in the eyes without trembling. No one. Except her. The moment stretched between them like a bridge neither expected to cross. Yunho's world was built on fear, respect earned through violence, and transactions that always came with a price. Yet here stood this woman, this stranger, offering something precious without asking for anything in return. "What's your name?" he found himself asking, though he never asked personal questions of civilians. "Mila," she said, adjusting her thin jacket against the wind. "And you?" He hesitated. In his world, names held power, and giving his real name to a stranger was dangerous. But something about her openness made deception feel impossible. "Yunho." "That's beautiful. Korean, right?" She didn't wait for confirmation, didn't probe deeper. "Well, Yunho, stay warm. And keep the scarf. You need it more than I do." She turned to leave, and panic flashed through him. When was the last time someone had walked away from him without wanting something, without fear, without calculation? "Wait," he called out. "I can't take this. It's yours." Mila paused, looking back with eyes that held no judgment, no suspicion, only kindness. "It was mine. Now it's yours." That's how gifts work. She disappeared into the night, leaving Yunho standing alone with her scarf around his neck and a feeling he couldn't name spreading through his chest. 3 days passed. Mila continued working, struggling with bills, warming her body with cheap tea, and not understanding why that man and his changed look still appeared in her mind. There had been something broken in his eyes, something that recognized her kindness as if it were a foreign language he desperately wanted to learn. Meanwhile, Yunho found himself obsessing over the encounter. He kept the scarf, sleeping with it near his bed, and to his own silent shame missing the light scent of bread that came from the fabric. He didn't understand the sensation. Kindness was unknown territory in his world of calculated moves and strategic alliances. His lieutenant Min Seok noticed the change immediately. "Boss, you've been distracted. Is there a problem we need to address?" Yunho touched the scarf he now wore beneath his expensive coat. "Find out everything about a woman named Mila, works at a bakery, mid-20s, black, about 5'6". "Sir, if she's caused trouble..." "She hasn't caused trouble, she gave me something." Yunho's voice carried a warning that ended the conversation, but when Min Seok returned with Mila's information, her address, her work schedule, her financial struggles, Yunho made an unexpected decision. He deleted the file without reading it. If he was going to know her, it would be the way she had chosen to know him, through direct interaction, not surveillance. So he decided to find her, and he did. He appeared at the bakery near the end of her shift, when Mila was cleaning the counter. When she saw him entering, tall, impeccable, tense, she recognized him immediately. "Are you feeling better?" Mila asked, as if he were just a friendly stranger and not the shadow that controlled half the city's underground operations. Yunho swallowed hard. "I want to return the scarf." Mila laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "It was yours from the moment I put it around your neck." That phrase cut through Yunho like a heated blade. In his world, everything was temporary, conditional, transactional. Nothing was ever simply given without expectation of return. He didn't return the scarf, but he also didn't leave. Instead, he ordered coffee and sat at a corner table, watching the easy way Mila interacted with customers, the patience she showed with difficult orders, the genuine smile she offered everyone who entered. "You know," she said during a lull, approaching his table with a fresh cup, "most people don't sit in bakeries for 2 hours just drinking coffee." "I'm not most people. I can see that." She studied his face, the sharp jawline, the expensive clothes that couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he held himself as if always ready for danger. "You're not from around here." "No, I'm not." "Business or pleasure?" "I'm still figuring that out." Something in his tone made her pause. There was loneliness in it, a kind of isolation that money couldn't fix. "Well, while you're figuring it out, you're welcome here. I make the best coffee in 3 blocks. Is that a professional guarantee?" "That's a Mila guarantee, which is worth more." He almost smiled at that, almost. "And what makes a Mila guarantee so valuable? Because I don't make promises I can't keep, and I don't give up on people easily." The weight of that statement settled between them. Yunho realized she wasn't just talking about coffee. Yunho began visiting the bakery regularly, always during Mila's shifts, always ordering the same black coffee, always sitting at the corner table where he could see both the entrance and the back exit. Old habits from a dangerous life. Their conversations started small: weather, neighborhood changes, her recommendations for the best pastries. But gradually, they deepened into something more substantial. "You never talk about your work," Mila observed one evening as she wiped down tables. "It's complicated. Most worthwhile things are." She sat across from him, something she'd started doing during slow periods. "I'm a good listener if you ever want to uncomplicate it." Yunho studied her face, searching for hidden motives, ulterior purposes. He found none. "What about you? Always wanted to work in a bakery?" "It's temporary. I'm saving money to open my own place someday." Her eyes lit up with dreams, somewhere that feels like home for people who don't have one. Good food, warm atmosphere, fair prices. "That's a nice dream." "It's not a dream, it's a plan." Her conviction was absolute. "My grandmother always said that if you can feed people's bodies and souls at the same time, you're doing God's work." "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was. Raised me after my parents died. Taught me that kindness isn't weakness. It's strength that most people are too afraid to use." The words hit Yunho like a physical blow. In his world, kindness was weakness. It got you killed, betrayed, destroyed. Yet here sat this woman who wielded kindness like armor and somehow remained unbroken. What happened to her? "Cancer 3 years ago. Left me this." She touched a small cross necklace. "And the recipe for the best cornbread in Chicago." "Is that what I smell when you're baking?" "You noticed." She seemed pleased. "I make a batch every Tuesday." It was her favorite day to bake. "Why Tuesday?" "Because Monday was for recovering from the weekend. Wednesday was for getting through the week. But Tuesday was for hope." Yunho found himself looking forward to Tuesdays. Their friendship, if that's what it was, developed in layers. Mila would save him the last coffee of the day, and they'd talk while she closed up. She told him about her dreams, her struggles with rent, her determination to build something meaningful from nothing. Yunho shared carefully edited versions of his life: his love for his younger sister who lived in Seoul, his complicated relationship with family expectations, his struggle with a business that demanded more than he sometimes wanted to give. "What kind of business?" she asked one evening. "Import and export," he said, which was technically true. "Must be stressful. You always look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." If only she knew how accurate that assessment was. But instead of the weight feeling heavier, her presence somehow made it more bearable. "Sometimes I think about what it would be like to do something else," he admitted, surprising himself. "Like what?" "Something honest, something that helps people instead of—" He caught himself before revealing too much. "Instead of what?" "Instead of just making money." Myla leaned forward, her expression serious. It's never too late to change direction, Yunho. My grandmother used to say that every day is a chance to become who you're supposed to be. The sincerity in her voice made something crack inside his chest. When was the last time someone had believed in his capacity for goodness? But their growing connection didn't go unnoticed. In Yunho's world, everything was monitored, analyzed, used as leverage, and Mila's kindness, her obvious effect on him, made her a target. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday evening. Yunho arrived at the bakery to find Mila serving a customer he recognized, Kim Jae-sung, a rival gang member who had no business in this neighborhood unless he was looking for something. Or someone. Yunho waited until Jae-sung left before approaching the counter. His entire demeanor shifted into something colder, more dangerous. "Did that man ask you anything unusual?" he asked. Myla blinked, startled by the change in his tone. "He just bought coffee and asked about our hours. Why, do you know him? Stay away from him if you see him again. Yunho, you're scaring me. What's going on?" He realized he'd revealed too much. In trying to protect her, he'd exposed the very thing that put her in danger, his connection to her. "It's nothing serious. Just be careful walking home alone." But it wasn't nothing. That night, Yunho called an emergency meeting with his inner circle. "Sir," Min-sok reported, "Kim's crew has been asking questions about your recent activities. They know about the girl." Yunho's blood turned to ice. "How much do they know?" "Enough to use her as leverage. They've been watching the bakery, learning her routines." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. In their world, loved ones were weapons, and Yunho had just handed his enemies the perfect ammunition. "Double the security around the bakery," Yunho ordered. "Discreet surveillance. She doesn't know." "Sir," Min-sok hesitated, "wouldn't it be easier to just distance yourself?" The look Yunho gave him could have frozen hell. "That's not an option." "But sir, she's a civilian. She doesn't understand the risks." "Which is exactly why she needs protection." Yunho's voice carried deadly finality. "Anyone who touches her answers to me personally." Meanwhile, Mila noticed the changes. Customers she'd never seen before lingered too long. Cars parked outside that weren't usually there. And Yunho, when he visited, seemed constantly on edge, his eyes scanning the room like he expected danger to materialize from the shadows. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" she asked him directly one evening. "Why would you think that? Because you look like a man who's fighting a war, and because strange people keep coming in here asking casual questions that don't feel casual." Her perceptiveness continued to amaze and terrify him. "Mila, if I asked you to trust me, would you?" "I already do, that's what worries me." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I care about you, Yunho, and caring about someone means wanting to help when they're in trouble. But I can't help if I don't know what's wrong." The simple honesty of her statement nearly broke him. She cared about him, not his money, not his power, not what he could do for her, just him. Some problems can't be solved with kindness, Mila. Maybe not, but they can be faced with support. You don't have to carry everything alone. That night, as she walked home from work, Mila felt the weight of being watched more intensely than ever. She quickened her pace, but the feeling intensified. When she turned the corner near her apartment, she found two men blocking the street. Her heart began to race, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Excuse me, I need to get through." "Actually," one of them said, stepping closer, "we need to talk to you about Yunho." "We know he cares about you," the man continued, his voice deceptively casual, "which makes you very valuable to us." Myla's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't know what you're talking about. I barely know him. But he knows you, and that's enough." The second man pulled out a phone, pointing it at her. "Smile, sweetheart. We're going to send your boyfriend a message." "He's not my boyfriend," she protested, but even as she said it, she realized how hollow it sounded. Whatever was growing between her and Yunho, it was real enough that these men considered her a threat. "Here's what's going to happen," the leader said. "You're going to call Yunho, tell him to meet you at the old warehouse on 5th Street, alone." "And if I refuse?" He smiled coldly, and Mila saw the outline of a weapon beneath his jacket. "Then we'll make sure he finds pieces of you instead of a whole person." Mila's mind raced. She thought about Yunho's warnings, his constant vigilance, the way he always seemed to be protecting himself from something. Now she understood. This was his world, a world where kindness was weakness and caring about someone made them a target. "I won't do it," she said quietly. Surprised by her own courage, the man's expression darkened. "Wrong answer." He nodded to one of his companions, who grabbed Mila's arm roughly. But before they could move, shadows detached themselves from the alleyway. Men in dark clothing materialized like ghosts, surrounding the kidnappers with military precision. "Let her go," came a voice from the darkness. Yunho stepped into the light, and Mila barely recognized him. Gone was the gentleman who bought bread and listened to her dreams. This was someone else entirely, someone dangerous, controlled, lethal. His eyes held a coldness that made the winter air feel warm by comparison. "Kim Jae-sung sends his regards," the leader said, still holding Mila. "He wants to discuss terms." "The only terms," Yunho said, his voice deadly quiet, "are these. You release her now, and I might let you live long enough to deliver a message back to your boss." "You're outnumbered, Yunho." "Am I?" As if on cue, red laser dots appeared on each of the kidnappers' chests. Snipers, positioned on surrounding rooftops, had them in their sights. The man holding Mila hesitated, realizing his tactical error. But instead of surrendering, he made a desperate choice. He pulled out a gun, pressing it against Mila's temple. One step closer, and she dies. Yunho froze. For the first time since the confrontation began, his composure cracked. Mila saw the anguish in his eyes, the way his hands trembled almost imperceptibly. She realized that her capture wasn't just about leverage, it was about destroying him emotionally. "Let her go," Yunho said, his voice breaking slightly. "Your fight is with me." "No," the man said. "My fight is with everything you care about. Kim wants you to know what it feels like to lose something precious." "Yunho," Mila said softly, meeting his eyes across the distance between them. "It's okay." "No, it's not okay," he replied, his voice raw with emotion. "This is my fault. I brought this into your life." "You brought yourself into my life," she corrected, her voice steady despite the gun at her head. "And I'm glad you did." The kidnapper's grip tightened. How touching. Unfortunately, this story doesn't have a happy ending. But he had underestimated Mila. Growing up in a rough neighborhood had taught her a few things about survival. She'd been watching, waiting for the right moment. As the man shifted his weight, distracted by his conversation with Yunho, she drove her elbow back into his ribs and dropped to the ground. The chaos that followed lasted only seconds. Yunho's men moved with practiced efficiency. When the dust settled, 2 kidnappers were dead, and the third was unconscious, zip-tied and ready for interrogation. Yunho rushed to Mila, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that surprised them both. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands running over her face, checking for injuries. "I'm fine," she whispered, but she was shaking not from fear, but from the adrenaline and the realization of how close she'd come to death. "No, you're not fine. None of this is fine." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes filled with pain and self-recrimination. "This is who I am, Mila. This is my world. Violence, danger, people who will hurt anyone I care about just to get to me." "Then change it." "It's not that simple." "Isn't it? You're the boss, right? Make different choices." Her naive faith in his ability to transform his life should have frustrated him. Instead, it planted a seed of possibility he'd never considered before. But first, they had to survive the war that was coming. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said, helping her to her feet. "Safe from what? This won't end here, will it?" Yunho's silence was answer enough. "Then we end it," Mila said with quiet determination. "Whatever this is, whoever these people are, we end it tonight." "Mila, you don't understand." "I understand enough. I understand that you're a good man caught in a bad situation. I understand that people are trying to hurt you through me, and I understand that running and hiding isn't going to solve anything." She was right, and they both knew it. Kim Jae-sung wouldn't stop until he destroyed everything Yunho cared about. The only way to protect Mila was to eliminate the threat entirely. "There's something I need to tell you," Yunho said as they walked toward his car, his security team forming a protective perimeter around them. "I already know," Mila said quietly. "You know what? I know you're not in import and export. I know those men weren't random criminals. And I know that whatever you really do, it's dangerous enough that people want to kill you for it. Yunho stopped walking. And you're still here. I'm still here. Why? Because 3 weeks ago, you were just a man standing in the cold, and I was just a woman with an extra scarf. Everything that's happened since then, it's not about what you do for a living. It's about who you are when no one's watching. And the man I've gotten to know, he's worth fighting for. In that moment, standing in the aftermath of violence with sirens wailing in the distance, Yunho made a decision that would change everything. The warehouse meeting was a trap, but Yunho walked into it anyway. He had to. Kim Jae-sung had made it clear that Mila's safety depended on his compliance, but this time Yunho came prepared, and more importantly, he came with a plan that Mila had helped him devise. "You're late," Jae-sung called out from the shadows as Yunho entered the abandoned building. "Traffic," Yunho replied, his hands visible but ready to move at the first sign of trouble. Jae-sung emerged with a dozen armed men, his confidence evident in his relaxed posture. "I have to admit I'm impressed. Most men would have cut their losses by now, abandoned the girl to save themselves. But you're willing to risk everything for a baker. What do you want? Your territory, your connections, your complete withdrawal from the port operations." Jae-sung smiled coldly. "In exchange, the girl lives. And if I refuse, then you'll receive pieces of her one at a time until you change your mind." Yunho's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm. "She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this. The great Yunho brought to his knees by a woman who makes bread." Jae-sung laughed, the sound echoing off the warehouse walls. "It's almost poetic. The most feared man in the city, destroyed by his own weakness for kindness." What Jae-sung didn't know was that Mila wasn't just a weakness. She was also Yunho's motivation to finally end this cycle of violence. And she certainly wasn't the helpless victim Jae-sung believed her to be. "I accept your terms," Yunho said, pulling out a document. "Complete withdrawal from port operations. Territory transfers. Everything you wanted." Jae-sung's eyes gleamed with triumph as he reached for the papers. But as his fingers touched the document, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the night air. "What the hell?" Jae-sung spun around looking toward his men for explanation. "Sir," one of them said urgently, "we have a problem. The police are surrounding the building." "Impossible. We own half the cops in this district." "Not anymore," came a voice from the entrance. Mila walked in, flanked by federal agents and Detective Sarah Chen, a corruption investigator who'd been building a case against both gangs for months. But she wasn't alone. Behind her walked Yunho's sister, Yuna, who had flown in from Seoul with evidence of international money laundering operations. "You called the police," Jae-sung snarled at Yunho. "No," Yunho said, staring at Mila in amazement and pride. "She did." "I may not understand your world," Mila said, addressing both men but keeping her eyes on Yunho, "but I understand that this ends now. I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of watching good people get hurt because of pride and territory and things that don't matter." She turned to face Jae-sung directly, showing no fear despite being surrounded by armed men. "And I'm tired of men like you, thinking that kindness makes people weak. You're about to learn exactly how wrong you are." Detective Chen stepped forward, her badge clearly visible. "Mr. Kim, Mr. Yunho, we've been monitoring communications between both your organizations for the past 6 months. We have enough evidence to prosecute everyone in this room, but we're prepared to offer immunity to anyone willing to cooperate in dismantling these operations permanently." The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of police vehicles surrounding the building and helicopters circling overhead. "This is impossible," Jae-sung muttered, his confidence cracking. "You can't have gotten this much evidence without inside help." "You're right," Yunho said, stepping forward. "I've been working with federal investigators for the past 2 weeks, ever since someone I care about nearly died because of this life I've been living." Jae-sung's face twisted with rage. "So you betrayed everything. I chose something better," Yunho interrupted. "Something worth more than money or territory or fear." Jae-sung raised his weapon toward Mila, his finger moving toward the trigger. "You naive little—" Yunho moved faster than anyone thought possible, disarming Jae-sung and putting him on the ground before he could finish the sentence. But this time, instead of violence, Yunho simply held him down until the federal agents could take him into custody. "It's over," Yunho said, not just to Jaisung, but to himself and the life he was leaving behind. The arrests took hours. Yunho provided detailed information about money laundering operations, corrupt officials and rival gang activities. In exchange, he received immunity and a chance to start over, legitimately. His cooperation led to the dismantling of 3 major criminal organizations and the arrest of dozens of corrupt officials. Yuna had brought evidence of the Seoul connections, helping to ensure that the investigation would extend internationally and prevent the organizations from simply relocating. As dawn broke over the city, Yunho and Mila sat on the steps outside the federal building. Exhausted but alive and free. "I can't believe you called the police, Mai," he said. "I can't believe you thought I wouldn't." She smiled tiredly. "I told you that first night. I see you, the real you. Not the man everyone else fears, but the man who trembled in the cold and needed kindness. That man doesn't deserve you. Then become someone who does." Yunho reached into his jacket and pulled out her scarf, the one that had started everything. "I kept this," he said. "It reminded me that good people still exist in the world." Mila took the scarf, but instead of putting it on, she wrapped it around both their necks, pulling them closer together. "Black poor girl offers her scarf to a freezing stranger," she said softly, echoing the moment that had changed both their lives. Not knowing he's a Korean Mafia boss, his eyes change. "They did change," Yunho whispered, his forehead touching hers. "You changed them. You changed everything." Their first kiss tasted like freedom and new beginnings, witnessed by the sunrise that painted the sky in shades of hope and possibility. 6 months later, the transformation was complete, but gradual. Yunho had used his business connections and financial resources to establish a legitimate import company, specializing in Korean goods and helping small businesses access international markets. His first client was Mila's bakery, now expanded and thriving with authentic Korean pastries alongside her grandmother's recipes. "You know," Mila said one morning as she watched Yunho help unload a shipment of specialty flour from Seoul, "I never imagined my life would include words like international trade agreements and customs documentation. And I never imagined mine would include terms like sourdough starter and customer service on," he replied, grinning as he carried bags of flour into the bakery. The transition hadn't been easy. Yunho had spent months in debriefings with federal agents, testifying in trials, and working to dismantle the networks he'd once controlled. Some former associates had threatened him, others had tried to convince him to return, but Mila's steady presence and unwavering faith in his capacity for change had kept him anchored to his new path. "Mr. Yunho," called Marcus, one of the neighborhood kids who'd started hanging around the bakery after school. "Can you teach me how to say thank you in Korean again?" "Gamsahamnida," Yunho said patiently, crouching down to Marcus's level. "But you can also just say gomawo to friends. Gomawo, Mr. Yunho." Watching Yunho interact with the children who'd adopted him as an unofficial big brother, Mila felt her heart swell with pride and love. This was the man she'd seen that first night, not the feared leader, but the person who'd been hidden beneath layers of necessity and survival. "You're good with them," she said, as Marcus ran off to practice his Korean with the other kids. "They remind me of my sister when she was young, before everything got complicated." Yuna had visited twice since the warehouse incident, and Mila had watched the siblings reconnect in ways that years of Yunho's criminal life had made impossible. The guilt he'd carried about the distance between them was slowly healing as they built new memories untainted by violence. "Speaking of Yuna," Mila said, "she called this morning. She's bringing someone special when she visits next month." "Someone special?" "A boyfriend. She wants your approval, apparently." Yunho's expression shifted into something resembling his old protective intensity, and Mila laughed. "Down, boy. She's 26 years old and perfectly capable of choosing her own relationships. I know that. I want to make sure he's good enough for her. The way I had to make sure you were good enough for me. That's different." "How?" "Because you're—" He paused, searching for words. "Because you're you. You see the best in people, even when they can't see it in themselves. Yuna deserves someone who sees her the way you see me." Mila's heart melted a little more. Even after all these months, Yunho's capacity for love and protection, when channeled in healthy directions, never ceased to amaze her. "For what it's worth," she said, I think you're going to be an excellent big brother, the non-terrifying kind. I'm still working on that part. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on a foundation of trust that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. They'd moved in together 3 months ago, into a small apartment above the bakery that felt more like home than anywhere either of them had ever lived. Mila, Yunho said suddenly, his voice taking on a serious tone that made her look up from the pastry display she was arranging. What is it? There's something I need to tell you, something I should have said months ago. Her heart skipped, but not with fear, with anticipation. I love you, he said simply. I've loved you since the night you gave me your scarf, but I was too afraid to say it. Afraid that loving you would put you in danger. Afraid that I didn't deserve to feel something so good. And now? Now I know that love isn't something you deserve or don't deserve. It's something you choose every day to honor and protect and nurture. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. I choose you, Mila, every day for the rest of my life, if you'll have me. Yunho. I know it's not the most romantic setting, he said, glancing around at the flour-dusted bakery with its mismatched chairs and hand-painted signs. But this place, this life we've built together, it's real in a way nothing in my old life ever was. It's perfect, she said, tears starting to blur her vision. And yes, I'll have you. Every day for the rest of my life. She stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, tasting the sweetness of new beginnings and old dreams finally coming true. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. I've loved you since you asked me why I gave you the scarf, because in that moment I saw someone who'd forgotten that kindness exists, and I wanted to remind you. You did more than remind me, Yunho said, holding her close. You taught me how to live with it, how to be worthy of it. Outside, snow began to fall, the first snow of the season, gentle and clean, covering the city in a blanket of fresh possibility. Through the bakery window, they could see children catching snowflakes on their tongues, couples walking hand in hand, and the ordinary magic of life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. You know what this means, don't you? Mila said, watching the snow accumulate on the sidewalk. What? Someone out there is probably cold right now. Maybe we should make some extra coffee. Keep the door open a little longer tonight. Yunho smiled, understanding perfectly. This was who they were, people who noticed when others were cold, who offered warmth without expecting anything in return, who believed that small acts of kindness could change the world one person at a time. I'll put on a fresh pot, he said, and I'll get some extra scarves from upstairs, just in case. As they worked together to prepare for whatever strangers might need shelter from the cold, Yunho reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a moment of unexpected kindness on a freezing street corner to this warm, flower-scented sanctuary they'd built together, it seemed impossible and inevitable at the same time. Black poor girl offers her scarf to a freezing stranger, he said softly, echoing the story that had become their origin myth. Not knowing he's a Korean Mafia boss, his eyes change. They did change, Mila agreed, arranging fresh pastries in the window display. But you know what, so did mine. I used to think kindness was just about giving what you could spare. Now I know it's about giving what matters most, even when it's scary. What matters most? Trust, hope, the belief that people can become better than they were. She looked at him with eyes full of love and certainty. The belief that love is always worth the risk. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and inside the warm bakery, two people who'd found each other in the cold prepared to offer the same gift to anyone who might